Thank you for joining me for this short introduction to researching your South African ancestors. A follow-up session called Resources for Researching South African Ancestors is available as well. And I also have a DNA session specifically aimed at South Africans and the tests available to them. You are more than welcome to join me for those. All the links mentioned in this session are listed in the accompanying downloadable PDF file, which you can find on the main page of this session. So we will cover in this session some of the very basic early history and some geography of South Africa. It is important for me to mention that I'm not an historian and my knowledge is self-taught. I will end the session by introducing some important resources. But as I've said before, please watch my session on resources for more information. The southern point of Africa was frequented by Portuguese, Dutch, and other ships on their way to India around 160 years before settlement was made. Inhabited by mostly the San or Khoikhoi nation, it was a convenient stop for filling up on fresh water and provisions. On 6 April 1652, 3 Dutch ships of the Dutch East India Company, with less than 100 people on board, arrived to establish a small settlement. They were instructed to establish vegetable gardens and trade cattle with the natives to ensure a constant supply of fresh food for the visiting Dutch East India Company vessels. The colony was passed back and forth a few times between British and Dutch rule in the period between 1795 and 1806. The Cape then remained in a British Empire until becoming self-governing in 1872. Slavery existed from 1653 and slaves came from Portuguese Mozambique, French Madagascar and Dutch India. It was eventually abolished in 1834, but slaves were still bound to their masters for another 4 to 6 years. The Great Trek started in 1835. Settlers from mostly Dutch and French descent, called Boers or Voortrekkers, trekked inland to eventually form their own Boer republics of Transvaal, Natal and the Orange Free State. Now this is just a brief mention of major European immigrational events to the Cape of Good Hope. As previously mentioned, 3 Dutch ships of the Dutch East India Company arrived to establish a small settlement on the 6th of April 1652. In late 1685, the Dutch East India Company in Amsterdam decided to send French Huguenot refugees to the Cape of Good Hope for settlement. The Huguenots were French Protestants who were persecuted in France for their religious beliefs. Even though a few French Huguenots had already arrived from 1671, the first large group of 180 arrived in 1688. They were composed of the families of highly experienced craftsmen and farmers. By the 1690s, 201 French Huguenots had settled at the Cape. The next big group was called the 1820 British settlers, who arrived in Table Bay on board the Nautilus and Chapman on the 17th of March 1820. From the Cape Colony, the settlers were sent to Algoa Bay, later known as Port Elizabeth. A lot of information can be found online and multiple books have been published on the British settlers. This slide includes a summary of the commencement of civil registrations and official child adoptions in South Africa. This information is handy to have when looking for source documents. It is important to know that births and adoptions are generally not available online, but marriages and deaths are. There are earlier records here and there, but these are the official commencement dates. Because birth registrations are not available, church baptism records are the best alternative. Then also, apart from civil registrations of deaths and marriages and church records, another valuable South African record is the death notice, which is part of the probate file. But more about that in another slide towards the end. The next few slides will focus on a few handy map sites, websites for geographical research that we all know is important for family history research. The University of Cape Town holds a large collection of over 500 maps of Africa. The collection was scanned with the support of William and Yvonne Jacobson Digital Africana program. This program funds collaborative work between the Library of the University of Cape Town and Stanford Library, allowing the universities to share cartographic resources for the benefit of both universities. Ivan Meyer, one of the members of the South African Genealogy Facebook group, has created a Google map linked to the UCT maps mentioned in the previous slide. This is a very handy tool to find the maps you are interested in. A free downloadable atlas published in 1922 is available from archive.org. It was published by Aaron A. Walker. The next couple of slides list map resources to investigate in your own time. These are the University of Texas library maps and old maps online. Church records are very important for South African research, and knowing a little bit about the church history is very handy. The settlement of the Cape was by Protestant Holland, and the biggest and most important church in the early days was the Dutch Reformed Church. Cornel Viljoen created a map which lists the formation of the early congregations, and it can be seen as roughly following the timeline of the formation of towns and settlements. The earliest ones, marked in red, were 1665 Cape Town, 1686 Stellenbosch, 1691 Paarl or Drakenstein, 1743 Tulbagh or Rudezand, 1745 Malmesbury or Swartland, 1792 Graafreinet, 1798 Swellendam. The map legend also shows the Cape Province congregations established between 1800 and 1850. They are marked with green markers, and then between 1851 and 1900 with yellow markers. As mentioned in one of my earlier slides, the Great Trek in 1835 by Dutch and French settlers, also called voortrekkers, took place by the group trekking inland into the north of the country. The voortrekkers settled in the area between Vaal and Limpopo rivers around 1837. This later formed part of Transvaal. The Natalia Republic was a Boer republic founded in 1839 after a voortrekker victory against the Zulus at the Battle of Blood River. Natal became a British colony in 1843 after the British government annexed the Boer Republic. After the British annexation, many of the voortrekkers in Natal tracked north into an area later known as the Orange Free State, as well as Transvaal. In 1852, the British recognized the independence of the Boer Afrikaner in what later became the Transvaal. The Boers drafted a constitution in 1855, and the communities centered at Pretoria, Potchefstroom and Rustenburg joined in 1857 to form a Transvaal state called the South African Republic. The independence of the Republic was retained after the Boer victory of the First Anglo-Boer War, fought between 1880 and 1881. The Second Anglo-Boer War, fought between 1899 and 1902, saw the involvement of 88,000 Boer men and 500,000 British and Allied soldiers. It led to the unfortunate death of 26,000 women and children in British concentration camps. The Boers accepted their loss of independence with the signing of the Peace Treaty of Vereniging on the 31st of May 1902. Exactly 8 years later, on the 31st of May 1910, the four colonies of the Cape, Transvaal, Orange Free State and Natal were unified and the Union of South Africa was formed. Self-determination had finally been negotiated and achieved. The provinces of South Africa stayed that way between 1910 and 1994, after which it was divided further in more provinces. I will start my introduction to resources with the Facebook group, where you'll find hundreds of extra resources. It is called South African Genealogy, and it's got almost 17,000 members at the moment. It is a convivial group of very helpful people. There's also a group called Using DNA for Genealogy, where there's a member tool for comparing your JetMatch kit number to that of others in the group in order to make collaboration a little bit easier. There's also a group called Indexing South African Records on FamilySearch. This is a support group for training and general help when indexing South African records. Due to the uniqueness of Afrikaans surnames and place names, it is very important to join this group if you are unfamiliar with South African records. Please note, when joining these groups, you will have to answer some questions, and if those questions aren't answered, it might lead to automatic decline. As mentioned before, South African death notices, which are included in probate files, are very important documents to consult during research and are available from 1834 onwards. It is important to note that not every person will have one, since it is dependent on the deceased estate registration. Historical death notices are available at the archives and often on FamilySearch. We will talk about the archives in the next slide. Death notices can contain the following information: the spouse's name, the deceased spouse's name, the last address of the deceased, where the deceased was born, usually also the parents' names, all children, but it is worth noting that previously deceased children are often left out. The husband of any married daughter of the deceased might be mentioned. If children predeceased the deceased, the grandchildren are often listed. There's also often birth dates of minor children on the death notice. But another important point to remember is that they were and are completed by family members of the deceased, and they may contain errors. In order to find estate files and death notices online, you need to know the estate file number. This slide is a guide to where you can find estate file numbers. So where to find these estate file numbers? The dates are approximate and can be different for different master offices and archive depots. The older estates pre-1980 are indexed on the archive index, which we will talk about in the next slide. The estates of 1995 to 2008 are indexed in the Massetti files. The Massetti files is a set of Excel spreadsheets that were extracted from an older database. It is worth noting that the spouse surname and the surname fields are the wrong way around. So you need to use the spouse surname column to search for a deceased person. The estate files after 2008 are all indexed on the Master's Office website. You can use these estate file numbers to find a file on FamilySearch if it is available. For links to these FamilySearch collections, you can download a PDF at the link given there. Now let's look at the South African National Archives. It has an old and a new search engine. The records that you find have usually got reference numbers and depots listed. Depots are the archive centers in the pre-1995 provinces. The old search engine is a lot more powerful with better refinement, but the new site is more user-friendly. So if we look at the most important depots that you will find in your search results, and please know these are not all of them, these are just the most important ones or the bigger ones. When you see Depot KAB, it means it's Cape Town, and they can contain the death notices from 1834 to 1959. The next one is TAB, which is Pretoria or Transvaal. It contains death notices up to 1976. VAB is Bloemfontein or the Orange Free State, and it contains death notices up to 1956. NAB is Pietermaritzburg or Natal, and it contains death notices up to 1971. You can use the RSA option during a search, and it will search all depots. Like I've said, some collections are available on FamilySearch, and you can download a list at that link. For all depots or databases, except KAB, you can order any document not available on FamilySearch from eGGSA, and there's a link for that. For depot or database KAB, you order what is not available online from a private researcher. I use Heather McAllister. She also covers the other depots. You can find her website on the link there and her email address. You can also order KAB directly from the archives, but I find Heather the easiest at the moment. FamilySearch contains the biggest collection of South African records. You won't find much anywhere else. FamilySearch, and it's because it's on FamilySearch, it's all free. The status of our FamilySearch collection, South African collections, are one, not digitized at all, and you'll see a little microfilm reel. There's still lots of those. Then there are collections which are digitized from microfilms but not yet indexed or transcribed. You can search the catalog on FamilySearch, and a list of those collections can also be downloaded here. And then you get the collections which are indexed and transcribed, and you can search for the records on FamilySearch. This icon will display even if the collection is not fully indexed, and it may be worth browsing through them if you can't find anything. The collections are also sometimes only available at affiliated family history centers, and unfortunately, most South African records are in category 1 or 2, either not digitized or not indexed yet. Please also always sign into FamilySearch. That is it from me for this session. Please join me in the session Resources for Researching South African Ancestors. Thank you.